Let's move on to debate number 2. And here is the big question. Should the government bail out Jet Airways? Naresh Goyal claims he's run out of money. There is no more money to pay the pilots. There is no more money to pay the engineers who maintain the aircraft. There is no more money to fly these aircraft. And it's a massive crisis that one of India's biggest airlines is looking at right now. If Jet Airways goes down, what is the impact not just on the aviation sector and its investors and the bankers, but on passengers? If an airline that had over 100 aircraft that ran hundreds of flights, not just between the main cities, but connecting us internationally, connecting us to the smaller cities of our country, if that airline shuts down tomorrow, what is the impact? And so, should the government take the responsibility here or not? We will bring you all of the updates on what has been happening from the bankers to the government intervention. Here is Utkarsh with a detailed report before we begin this debate.
So it's been an action-packed day when it comes to Jet Airways. In fact, earlier in the day, news coming in from sources that the lenders will really go ahead and look at bailing out the airline. There have been also sources indicating that they'll be buying out most of the exposure of Naresh Goyal in the company, but on one condition. They want Naresh Goyal, Anita Goyal and the two other NG group, Naresh Goyal group nominees to be out of Jet Airways, and they'll be looking at a new management coming in. In fact, our sources also indicated us that the lenders have started looking for possible options for a management change. They are looking at ex-Air India CMDs, they are looking at ex-private airline CEOs, someone like a Neil Mill, someone like an Aditya Ghosh, also ex-aviation ministry officials, ex-DGC officials also in the fray. Also, what is important to note is that the lenders believe at this point of time that there will be no new investment coming in. So the idea at this point of time is that lenders will put in money, Naresh Goyal will be moved out of the system, they will stabilize the airline with some new management coming in, and parallelly there will be a hunt for a new investor. But the lenders believe that it will take at least 1.5 to 2 months, because any new investor which comes in will start with the due diligence. It will take a lot of time for that to happen. But a very important decision of all of this had to be taken in the lenders meet. The lenders meet, which was around at 5 to happening today. We are still awaiting results of that. But what we have been told before the meet was that the private bankers were not really in favor of putting any money. But on the other hand, the lenders of PSUs were in support, given the fact that the government has given them a mandate that they do not want to take this airline to NCLT. Also, there are 27,000 jobs online. So obviously a lot depends on what happens in the lenders meet. But the outline is pretty clear at this point of time that the lenders will be picking up stakes from Naresh Goyal. He will move out of the system, and a search for a new buyer for Jet Airways will continue.
So that's the situation so far. Like Utkarsh was telling us, that there was a meeting today held between the various lenders, but we don't know if any concrete decision has been taken so far. Let's say good evening to Parvez Damania, former director for Kingfisher, Bijon Mishra, a consumer activist, Dr. Gulrez Sheikh, spokesperson for the BJP, and Air Marshal Kapil Khak, also an aviation expert, joining us this evening. But I want to start with Mr. Parvez Damania. Mr. Damania, what should the government do at this point? Because if Jet Airways goes down, it will have a larger impact.
I agree with you completely. It will affect the aviation industry, and the jobs will also get affected. 23,000 people, a lot of people would lose their job. But at the same time, I'm very, very clear that the government should not get into the business of running an airline. Government was already a major problem handling Air India. Now, if State Bank of India takes over the stake of Etihad, in all practical purpose, State Bank will own Jet Airways. Now, State Bank doesn't have the expertise or the manpower nor the knowledge to run this industry. It's a very delicate industry. It's a very complicated industry. And why should State Bank end up running the airline? I do not understand how the bank let the situation come up till this level. There should have been some red flags somewhere. So much loss and so much disaster could have been accumulated in such a short time. And I want to understand, suppose State Bank of India doesn't find a buyer, then what is going to happen for the next 5 years, 10 years? Is State Bank going to run the airline? And how much more capital is State Bank going to infuse? Right now, they've already infused about 8,500 crores, which is completely wiped out. Suppose they convert the entire loan to equity, that's fine. But what about fresh capital? What about the lender payments? What about the flight cancellations? Today, there are only 35 aircrafts flying out of 119 aircrafts. Can you imagine the cost and the effort to get all those 119 aircrafts flying? And another disaster waiting to happen is, I'm told that about 100 pilots have left.
Yes.
Today, pilot shortage is a huge problem all over the world. Forget in India, all over the world. The minute 100 pilots leave, that means 25 aircrafts are grounded for good. Where are they going to get these pilots? I mean, there are very few people available in India or internationally who can retrieve this whole situation. So it's a very uphill task. And I'm not sure if State Bank of India should own an airline. Tomorrow,
Correct.
a steel plant will collapse. Will State Bank of India start owning a steel plant? I mean, this is never going to stop. So I think the government should do whatever possible to see that the airline closes down. But giving the ownership of an airline like Jet, which is in huge losses, huge amount of accumulated losses, to State Bank of India, or I mean, I don't think a government should be in the business of running an airline.
Frankly, I do agree with you that if there is pending debt, the usual response is that you get equity, you get stake in that company, and then you try and get something out of that company to recover your money. But in an aviation business, in a airline which is sinking, not making any money quarter after quarter, only registering losses, how are the banks going to recover anything? Air Marshal Khak, I'm coming to you next on this. Do you agree that perhaps the lenders and even the authorities should have moved in earlier? They've waited for far too long for this situation to fester within the airline, and now maybe it may be too late.
But that's our character. This is a kind of a built-in structure of Indian decision-making that you come to the precipice, and before you sort of fall into the abyss, you take a decision. Very characteristic of Indian decision-making. I'd like to remind you, Tanvi, this was red flagged in at least 2 discussions we had that time on Air India.
Yes.
And we said, look, there is a looming crisis in Jet Air as well. This is about 6-7 months ago.
Yes.
But Mirror now is not running Jet Airways, and the government should have taken note. I believe it is a crisis situation in terms of humongous kind of stretches in the financial position of the airline. It's it's in negative in terms of overall assets. Thirdly, debts have already been talked about. It's about 8,500 at last count, and no money to pay pilots. It's already been said by the panelists earlier. At this moment, Jet Airways and the stakeholders, we must flag the stakeholders. I mean, we ourselves as citizens, as passengers, as stakeholders, so are the regulators, so are the lenders, so is the government. Because government with 2 months to go, less than 2 months to go, cannot let an airline go down. I mean, it has very huge political impact. That's why you see this flurry of meetings that have been going on. You yourself referred to the meeting which has gone on today. I don't know what the results of the meeting is, but it's a situation of being in between a rock and a hard place. In a rock situation, what has happened is the worst case for Jet Airways is a chairman promoter who is in denial. Totally in denial.
Yes, absolutely.
It's been losing 1,000 crores every quarter from 1st of April last year, and it will continue to lose even more. Because if you have 1/3 of your fleet flying and 2/3 of your fleet is on the ground, even a child in civil aviation knows that an aircraft which is sitting on ground is a huge loss to the airline. We'll only get to know the loss much, much later. So what I was referring to the rock and the hard place is, rock is that what the resolution plan which has featured in the media is a judicious mix of equity infusion, debt restructuring, some elements of sale, refinancing the loan, aircraft loan, which is approximately 17,000 crores of the 8,500 crores I mentioned.
Yes.
This is being talked about, and the State Bank of India is actually leading that process of the plan. I would like to ask the State Bank of India, what were you doing, sitting on your haunches for the last year and 2 months, and now raising this issue 2 months before the election? Now that is one. The second part is, why not go through the insolvency and the bankruptcy route? I know it's a very uncertain plan. The point that was made by Mr. Damania, that you don't have SBI running an airline. As it is, we don't need to have the government of India run Air India. And why add another burden to that huge problematique? So the question that needs to be addressed is, who will take this decision? It's unlikely to be taken by the government in the next 2 months unless there's an emergency infusion of funds, because Etihad, which has 24% of the equity of the airline, is refusing to put any more
exactly. So, Air Marshal, that's the whole point, right?
Etihad is itself losing 1.8 crore.
Yes, that's the whole point. And it's the same story, like you said, we discussed a few months ago. So nobody's willing to buy Air India. Nobody's willing to come in and rescue Jet in terms of buying stake. Of course, a Tata or a SpiceJet may looking at taking some of their routes and flights onto theirs to just, but that's not going to help the bankers or Jet Airways as an airline. And here is what my biggest concern is. This is exactly what happened in the run-up to Kingfisher going down. And I remember day after day, we would be tracking the bankers, asking them what's going on, and no decision would be taken, just meeting after meeting after meeting. And one fine day, the airline was shut. And soon after that, Vijay Mallya was gone, and the bankers are still struggling to get that money back. And Bijon Mishra, one has to ask the question today as well. Where is Naresh Goyal? What is his accountability if he goes missing like Vijay Mallya?
Absolutely, Tadvi. It has exposed and demonstrated in terms of poor governance in the financial sector in our country. You see, the financial sector in our country is in a real mess. In my view, the regulator, the bankers, the lenders, they are playing with people's money and nobody is accountable. And what I fail to understand, we have surveillance, we have auditors, we have all agencies which are in place to ensure that there is a timely intervention before it is too late. And now we have come to a stage when it is actually too late. And I won't be, I won't be afraid to say that, one day we'll just find this Mr. Goyal vanish in thin air. Again, what the public is going to be at, the losers. So what I wish to say is, it is time for the government to act with a real heavy hand, ensure that we are able to retrieve at least the assets which we have, try to find out certain professionals or certain leading private sector who are already in the business, who are reputed globally. They are invited, they are made to sit across the table, and some packages are offered to them so that they find it viable in business-wise. You see, it's a huge task which needs to be done, but it needs to be done because the people who are responsible cannot get away.
Yes.
Cannot get away. I do know that there must be meeting, there must be brainstorming, there must be, but what about the executive chairman who was responsible all this while, who has really played with public funds? What is he has to say?
Yes,
Where are his assets?
and once
what
upon
are
a
his
time,
investments? Private investments.
correct. Once
Why
upon a
not
time,
recover at this
Naresh
point of
Goyal, we all will remember, was the man at the helm of all aviation lobbying, when it was about policy decisions and government policies or changes in the aviation sector. And Naresh Goyal was visible everywhere. And when you don't see him, and in the last 2-3 years, he's completely gone underground, just doesn't appear in front of the media anywhere, that he is lying low because he's going to get away with this. And then the 23,000 people who will lose their jobs won't have anybody to answer them to. The banks who are already sitting on a debt of 8,000 crores and quarter after quarter there are losses building up, they won't have anybody who will answer them. The vendors, those who have given aircraft on lease and are waiting for their money, what is going to happen to all of those vendors? What is going to happen to all of those people?
It is going to rock the perception of the entire aviation industry. You know, everybody will think that this whole story of Indian aviation is fake.
Yes.
I mean, people like this bring down the whole industry. People are going to stop giving aircraft to India. The lease rents will go up and it will affect the whole industry. What I'm saying, today State Bank is saying Naresh Goyal and his family should resign. They should have done this a year ago, no? Okay, bhai, either you give up your position on the throne, on the chair, let a professional management come, or you pay up the money. Why have they waited till the airline closing down to ask him to leave here?
Yes, Mr. Damania, let me get a response from Dr. Gulresh Sheikh on it. Dr. Sheikh, do you want to explain to us, do you think that the banks have not moved at a fast enough pace here, that they have just let this fester? Because, of course, everybody knows the corporate bank nexus, so nothing seems to change no matter how many times we see the same story.
Tanvi, it is very convenient for me to say that government has no business in saving a private entity, and the bulk of the loan was given during the UPA days. But I'm not saying all those things. And it is very easy for the government to put the Jet Airways under the hammer of IBC to recover, but putting it under the hammer of
Doctor, please, doctor, let me correct you for 1 second. Doctor, please let me interrupt.
Sir,
there is nothing to recover.
No.
Everything is leased. All aircrafts will go away. The government will recover zero money.
Okay, Mr. Damania, okay, one minute. Yes, 1 minute.
When you were speaking, I was silent.
Okay, Dr. Gulresh, all he is saying is that there is nothing to recover because everything is on lease. It's not as if Jet Airways actually has a lot of assets for you to recover 8,000 crore rupees plus more. But go ahead and finish your point, please. Yes, Dr. Gulresh.
So I say that it is easy for government to put it under the IBC code, but this government is sensitive because air travel is no longer a luxury in India now. It's a day-to-day business. Plus there are jobs involved, families are involved in the jet aviation. Plus, Jet Aviation is a very good brand as far as the aviation industry is concerned. And I am repeating the words of SBI chief. What he said, that all hopes are not lost. And it is a unanimous decision by the heads of the banks, of which SBI is the leader of the consortium. And what they have planned, they are saying that till not all the hopes are lost, we should make the airlines fly, and we should not ground it.
So you're telling me a bunch of people
at whose cost?
You're telling me a bunch of people whose job is to run a bank, not an airline, are now going to decide that let's let the airline run at 1/3 of its fleet, and somehow they will manage to make money out of that and clear off the debts that this airline has not managed to clear in the last 5 years. It's easy for you to sit here and say the loans were given during UPS era. What did you do? How did you make the banks recover this money in the last 5 years that you have been in power? Have you not seen scam after scam, company after company go down? No, I don't understand this, Gulresh Sheikh. You are telling me all hope is not lost. Of course it is not lost. But how are you going to get this money back without people losing jobs?
And our bank chiefs are professional enough when it comes to their commercial interest, and for our bankers, their commercial interest is the priority, not the Naresh Goyal or
But when the airline was making loss for so many years, why did they wake up? I mean, why did they wait till most of the fleet is grounded?
When it comes to bailout, you should never forget the example of Japanese airlines, which was almost bankrupted. Now, after bailout, it is doing well, and there are options open. We can also have a
Doctor, we are very ignorant. Dr. Gulresh, we are very ignorant. Please explain what are the options open to the bank. I want to understand.
No. But the final call will be taken by the bankers.
What bankers? Bankers do not run airlines. The bankers should have recovered the money from Naresh Goyal years ago. Have they attached Naresh Goyal's house, his property, his assets, and they stopped him from flying out of the country?
Sir,
What are you
one
going to
thing
do if
is very
Naresh Goyal leaves
clear.
the country?
Jet Airways did a good brand.
Are
And
a good
I am
brand
sure
run by a bad
doing in the
brand?
last
No.
4 years?
What,
I'll
how
tell you
are you
something.
going to recover the money? All that I'm
Let
asking
me
you
tell
is
you
this.
something.
I'm
This
giving
good
you a
brand,
very
this
good
good brand
example.
joke
Japanese airlines
that has
was
been
almost
played
on
at
the
us
verge
and the
of being
taxpayers
banned.
time and again. 1 minute, gentlemen, 1 minute. This is the same story that was fed to the banks and fed to the taxpayers at the time of Kingfisher. What were we told? Oh, Kingfisher as a brand is worth thousands of crore rupees. I think 5,000 odd crore was something, some
Exactly.
kind of value that they found for this brand. What did they recover?
Nothing.
They've still not managed to recover
Tanvi,
even
there is
1/10
a
of the
difference
money that they
between
lent
Jet.
to Kingfisher. So please
See.
don't give us these
no.
false assurances about banks getting their money back, which also by the
See.
end of, by the way,
No,
at the end of the
Tanvi,
day, is
Tanvi,
taxpayers'
Tanvi.
money. Now, Mr.
As-
Bijon
as
Mishra,
far as,
Gulresh
Jet
Sheikh here
Airways
is
is
sitting and
concerned,
saying
it's a better
that our
brand
banks
and
are
it's
headed
not
by
forget
chiefs
that
who are
it-
professionals
No.
who know what has to be done. Do you think banks are moving at a good enough pace here? What's
They are-
left to
they are
recover?
quite professional when it comes to their commercial
No, no, no.
interests.
Bijon Mishra, please.
Tanvi,
Pardon?
it is again exposed that all these bankers, they are being highly influenced. There is a huge amount of political and executive, interference in the decision-making process. In my view, the bankers are not autonomous at all.
Sir, tell
They are
me
being
one
influenced.
thing, why
And
should
that is
any
how it has
government
got stretched
interfere
for
in
4
their
years.
decision?
For
They are
4 years they have got
professional
stretched.
bodies, they are professional
Why
entities.
should they
Bijon,
be
we went
interfering?
through this
You
exact
see, the
debate
point
during
is,
Kingfisher
they
times,
should have
if you
taken
remember.
action much earlier.
Bijon, if you
They should have
remember
taken
during
action much
Kingfisher time,
earlier.
we went
Okay, I
exactly
can't
the
understand
same
anything.
debate.
Gentlemen, if you're going to speak on each other,
Today,
over each other, we will not be able to.
Public money.
We will
They
not be able to
push
understand
public money
anything.
To the place where it cannot be recovered.
Correct.
Bijon, if you remember, we went through the
Tanvi, I
same
want
debate
to-
during
what
Kingfisher
I'm
time, you
I'm
remember?
saying
On the phone.
that
We did went through
all
the same
these
procedure
bankers
with Kingfisher.
have connived and
Tanvi, I
tried
am
to
the most
protect
disciplined
Naresh
And no
Goyal.
lesson
They
has been learned
protected
between
Jet
now,
Airways at the
between
cost of
Kingfisher
the-
and
No, no,
Jet
why
Airways
are
now.
government not
Same
holding
old
Naresh
stories
accountable?
playing out. I'm going to request all gentlemen to take a deep breath, please. Otherwise, we won't be able to understand anybody. Quickly, meanwhile, let me go across to one of our viewers. Kishore Dandekar is on the phone line calling us from Chennai. Kishore, what do you think? Should the government step in and save Jet Airways now?
I think it's high time that the banks immediately go for the IBC code and they get a resolution professional in place who will then decide what is the future course of action and not allow so many other people to influence them. I have a great suggestion. Why not ask the Pilots Guild of Jet Airways to come forward and run their airlines themselves? Why should they ask the banks to keep bailing out? They could also chip in, and they would be one of the best people to run the airline. And you see, the Jet and Kingfisher story actually went sour first with Jet taking over Air Sahara and Kingfisher taking over Air Deccan. That unholy act of theirs has pulled them down into the mud all these years. And now, added to that, last 1 year had been bad for the oil prices going up and all that, the cutthroat competition with
Yes.
price wars. I don't know what's wrong with the aviation ministry. Why are they not playing a little more careful and trying to control these kind of things? And Indigo is definitely trying to boss over everybody, and except for airlines like SpiceJet who have some guts to face this, the
Yes.
airline industry is not a very good shape right now.
Well, Mr. Dandekar,
think
at
this is what
once
I would
upon
like
a
to say.
time, that's what people used to say about Mr. Naresh Goyal and his airline and them bossing over everybody. But look how times turn. Marshal Kak, let me come to you on this aspect. The fact of the matter is that there is nobody right now who's expressed interest to buy Jet Airways, just like Air India. Etihad doesn't want to put in any more money. Naresh Goyal obviously doesn't have or is not going to put any more money. There is no other visible buyer in the market. So what option do we have? And if this company goes through the bankruptcy code, will the banks be able to get any money back?
There are very big question marks on that. That's what I said. It's a situation of rock and hard place. But I think India and its government have to come in at this moment, lest this take the route of Kingfisher. I say this because the point was earlier made that the government is interfering and, banks must be autonomous. I mean, come on, let's stop kidding. Banks, the SBI chairman is meeting the finance minister. He says, I have not come to take directions, but I am briefing him. But surely he must be getting the direction in
Intimate
terms
him
of
to
which way to
inform
go
him what is
forward.
going on.
One-
It doesn't mean
one-
that the finance minister is giving him directions.
That's
Mr.
true.
Gulresh Sheikh, I'll come to you.
I agree.
Let
but
him finish his point.
Let
I
him
will come to
finish.
you,
Let
Mr.
him
Sheikh.
finish.
Minister, what's
Let
going on?
me finish.
Let him finish, please. Let him
Now,
finish. Yes.
Expecting Etihad to put in money into Jet Airways, I think it's the biggest mistake we can make, because Etihad itself, over the last 3 years, each year has shown losses of 1.8 billion US dollars. I mean, that is the reality. It was in a position, in fact, it agreed to put in 2,000 crores a year back, but no one was interested because they wanted to come to the abyss and take the decision. This is the tragedy in this. But I think perhaps what was discussed today is would be a balance between going in the INB route,
Yes.
insolvency and bankruptcy route. That also can. But unfortunately, Jet Airways doesn't have assets. There are 6 companies which went through an INB route.
Yes.
And Tanvi, you'll be surprised to know that in each case, there are 6 or 7, I don't have the time, but each of them, the bidders made much more than nearly 2,000 crores of rupees worth than the net worth of the company.
Yes.
So it can be taken, but one has to put all the heads together. Lenders are the most important,
Yes,
whether they are under the government or independent, because they have to save their
some of
lives.
those cases,
There
if
has
I
been
am not
talk of
mistaken.
Tata's having expressed interest.
Yes, Air Marshal Kak, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but I've run out of time. In some of the cases, though, who have gone through under the IBC route were largely infrastructure companies who did have some assets, so it worked. I don't know how it will work out if Jet Airways has to go down that route, but Air Marshal Kak is right there that this has to be handled smartly. That even if the government has to intervene and some kind of a bailout package has to be worked out with the intervention of the other airlines like Tata or SpiceJet, it has to be done smartly so that you're able to recover the money as much as you can, so that you're able to save as many jobs as you can, and ensure that the airlines continues to function without us having to year after year after year then put some money. So maybe banks coming in and taking a stake of 24% is not going to help, because somebody else has to come and give some money for them to pay the pilots, to pay the aircraft, to pay the engineers, for the company to even function, for more money to be made. Who is going to give that initial amount of money is also a big question. There is no denying the fact that once again bankers have let this fester for far too long. That at least a year ago, if not more, some kind of stricter action should have been taken and the promoters should have been made accountable. One more time, we are staring at a situation where the rich promoter may just get away, and it's people who are working there, those 23,000 people whose livelihood depends on this airline, who are staring at a massive crisis. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and to our viewers for joining us on this debate.